welcome to Insights, a podcast focused on bringing you interesting conversations. As a college student with a love for learning and an interest in communications, I have conversations with others that are focused on learning more and going deeper. In this series before the November 8th election, I interview candidates for the Board of Education in Ravenna, Michigan, my hometown and where I went to school. I hope these conversations help you learn more about who these candidates are, what they believe, and really, just get to know them better. Before we begin, I have to include a disclaimer. Some of these episodes were recorded at Ravenna Baptist Church and Ravenna High School. Neither of these institutions endorses any candidate running for office, and do not necessarily hold any views expressed by myself or any candidate that I interview. Their facilities were simply used as spaces in which to record. One final note. I have my own personal beliefs and views just like everyone else. Doing these interviews exposed me to a lot of new ideas, many of which I'm still forming my opinions on. I do not endorse any specific candidate. However, you may see some of my personal beliefs come through as a natural part of the discussion. Please reach out if you have any questions or concerns. I'd be happy to discuss anything that was said. With that out of the way, please enjoy my conversation with Mr. Ryan Anderson. So yeah, that was good. But yeah, thank you for coming on. I appreciate this. I will apologize off the cuff. This is my first one, so I do apologize if we're ironing things out as we go. So we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, thanks for coming on. And
I appreciate you coordinating all this. It takes a lot of effort, I know, to coordinate all the various people that you're going to be interacting with, scheduling times, getting all it set up. You probably have to take this down and set it back a few times, I'm sure.
A few times, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I know that's a lot of work too. So
no, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, my thought was just learn the space a little bit more, like the recording podcast audio space, but also, I guess, give something to the community just to be able to know the school board members a little bit more. And I didn't really know you too well, so I figured this might be a good way to get to know you and, I guess, at the very least, inform my vote coming up in September. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or November, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess starting off, tell me a little bit about Ryan Anderson, because I really don't know you too well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the community doesn't either. I grew up in Sparta.
Yeah.
As did my wife. That's where we grew up. And and then I went away to college at Michigan Tech. And then I got a job as an engineer after I graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering.
Okay.
In Wisconsin. So after I graduated from college, I spent the next 8 to 10 years in Wisconsin.
Gotcha.
So I've only been back into the area, back by my stomping grounds, back closer to family, for the last year and a half.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is a very recent move then.
Fairly recent,
yeah.
We moved into the house that we have now on Memorial Day about a year and a half ago now.
Okay.
And so I don't have a lot of familiarity with the community here.
Gotcha.
So obviously that's a bit of a handicap, I understand. But I'm very eager to be involved in the community.
For sure.
I've got 5 young children myself.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of vested interest that I have in participating in the community. And so to get into a little more detail, I was also homeschooled when I grew up.
Gotcha.
So I played Little League at Sparta. Other than that, it was more just learning the skilled trades as a young man.
Okay.
We did a lot of remodeling with my dad. And so that was kind of my childhood, was between homeschooling and being a carpenter from the time I could swing a hammer.
Gotcha. A lot of handyman skills there.
Handyman skills. It was kind of like the farm environment, but not at a farm, so it's still learning to operate tractors, heavy equipment, more in the construction industry than the farm, but kind of that same type of upbringing where you're around the house doing stuff, out on job sites, that sort of thing. And but I've always had an interest in mechanical things. I loved working on equipment and stuff like that. And so mechanical engineering was a pretty cool avenue to take when I went off to college. And that just opened up a whole new world. I'm working at and operating heavy equipment and things of that nature. And just to be able to see from start to finish how the design process goes from taking some raw steel and fabricating it, designing it, And actually making a payloader that can actually lift and move dirt is really incredible.
Yeah, so you went from driving it then to learning how it's built from scratch, right? Like all the way up.
Design process, yeah. So
no, that's pretty cool.
That's basically what you're going to have in a mechanical engineering degree is that. And what I did in Wisconsin was I worked for Manitowoc Cranes as an engineer, and started off the first few years in sustaining, which was really just supporting existing product, working with the guys on the shop floor, dealing with design issues as they come up, things of that nature.
Okay, so more like tweaking than designing from the ground up type of things.
Correct. Yeah, tweaking the existing product design. Correct.
Gotcha.
But after a couple years of that, I moved into specializing in hydraulics.
Okay.
And that was really cool what you can do with fluid power. So I designed schematics, developed routing systems, spec pumps and motors, things of that nature.
Yeah, that's sweet.
For some of the biggest lattice crawler cranes that are made here in North America. So that's
really impressive. Cool. Yeah. Really cool. Caterpillar, or was it like Manitowoc? Like, is that like a brand like Caterpillar?
I did work for Caterpillar as an intern. So I moved to Peoria, Illinois, and did an internship with Caterpillar.
Gotcha.
I worked for Oshkosh Corporation, which makes cement trucks. And
Oshkosh. I heard clothing for some reason when I thought Oshkosh. I didn't know that.
Oshkosh Bagosh.
Gotcha.
No, that's the junior clothing brand.
Gotcha. Okay.
No. Oshkosh is a very large military contractor making military vehicles, but I worked in their cement truck division.
Okay.
I also worked for Pierce Manufacturing as an intern that makes the premier fire truck line in America.
Dang.
That's in Appleton, Wisconsin.
Okay.
So I spent a bit of time in Wisconsin during my education in college, and then after moved to Manitowoc and did. So a lattice crawler crane is what you're going to see constructing bridge overpasses and things of that nature.
Okay.
So that's something that is kind of like a bulldozer in that it has a track on it, but it's a crane that has the big boom for lifting things. And so that's primarily what they're going to use for constructing overpasses, bridgeways, and those are on the smaller scale. On the bigger scale, they're going to be used to construct power plants, refineries, things of that nature.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So no, that's sweet.
Yeah, that was very cool. But at that juncture, we had 4 kids and wanted to be closer to family. Really wanted to get back into the Michigan area.
Gotcha. Did you get married in Wisconsin then, or over here?
I got married here.
Okay, gotcha.
I came back to get married. I was already in Wisconsin at the time. I had just started my job at Manitowoc Cranes.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But married a girl that lived just less than 2 miles down the road from where I grew up. And
it's funny how those things work sometimes.
Yeah. And so most of our courting relationship was long distance while I was at school.
Gotcha.
Took a few trips, up there, and then of course once we were in Wisconsin, we used the Badger to come back and forth a few times to visit family and all that. But the long was always ultimately to get back closer to family, get back in this area that we love, and so we finally did that. Less than 2 years ago, and so just looking to get involved and plugged in the community.
Yeah, no, that's sweet. So you guys are in the Ravenna area now then?
Yep, technically Conklin is our mailing address.
Okay, so I did find the right Facebook profile. That's good to know. I did a little bit of looking. I couldn't find a whole lot.
Sheep in the profile picture?
I did see that. That was good.
So we've already started a little hobby farm.
That's perfect. Some of my cousins do that too. It was. I've gotten to watch them before. That keeps you busy, I'm sure.
It does. We raised 3 pigs over the summer, and we just I butchered one myself, and they had the other 2 butchered locally here.
Yeah.
And we've got 5 sheep that we're gonna try to use for breeding.
Nice.
So we're gonna keep those, and yeah.
No, that's really cool, actually.
And 4 chickens,
Yeah. No, that's fun. I did some FFA stuff as well, so no, that's really fun. Very Ravenna too. I like that.
Absolutely, and it's great for the kids.
Yeah,
that they learn that where the meat comes from that you buy at the grocery store.
Yeah,
they've seen the whole process and all of that, and they get a good biology lesson too when you get to the end of when the pigs are ready to go.
Very true. Very, very true. Yeah. No, that's cool. That's really cool. Just coming back here and all that. I guess kind of what I wanted to ask you too was so obviously Ravenna is a small town area. What kind of draws you? Obviously, you said Sparta area too, but what kind of draws you to this small town, more farm community type of thing? What do you love most about that?
The culture.
Yeah.
I'm not a big townsy kind of guy.
Gotcha.
Just soon have a place out in the country that I can raise my kids. do the hobby farm thing, be amongst neighbors that appreciate that lifestyle and that worldview. A lot of times it comes with that.
For sure.
So yeah, the relationships, you don't need to, nothing wrong with this, but you don't need to be next to houses that are stacked next together in order to have neighbors in a community.
Right.
And we've been working on our house, and we did the siding over the winter. And once spring came out and people were driving by, we realized how many people in the community had just kind of been paying attention.
Yeah.
And keeping an eye on things and stopping by and saying, "Oh, I've seen the work you did in your house," and all that. And so even when in a more rural setting, there's definitely a community here that we love.
For sure.
And just an environment that's great for the kids and all that.
Yeah. So are your kids in Ravenna Public Schools then?
Actually, they're homeschooled right now.
Gotcha.
We came into the community, just kind of trying to get our feet with a house that was a major fixer-upper.
Yeah.
And, we looked at Ravenna, and, there's very particular reasons why I'm running for school board and some things that I really want to see addressed.
For sure.
Before I commit my kids to go in there. So.
Gotcha. No, so you're running more, not necessarily because you're in there yet, but because you want to make sure and help.
Correct.
That it's a good environment for them.
Absolutely.
Gotcha. No, yeah, that's good to know too. That's really cool. That kind of leads into the next question I had. What are your reasons for running here too? And it looks like we might spend a little bit of time on this one.
We could, yeah.
Yeah.
And because, it's not like, as we've gone over, lived in Wisconsin for several years, just came back recently.
Yeah.
And so lacking the familiarity with the community, I really want to make up for that in the conviction, the ideology that I have to offer.
For sure.
I would say that the prevailing, whether we realize it or not, the prevailing ideology that's moving not just locally but nationally, you could probably say is progressivism, right? Obviously we've been, since the Soviet Union fell, you had communists that came over and have been working to infiltrate the institutions and things of that nature. More broadly speaking, you can kind of put that under progressivism.
Gotcha.
And really that's just a veneer over the religious system of Karl Marx.
Okay.
And Karl Marx's religious system is one in which he believed humanity was on an iterative process towards perfection, right?
Yeah.
And so how that process ratchets forward towards the perfect man, okay? And you'll hear the religious undertones in the system, even though Karl Marx was, professed atheist.
Right. On the surface level, I've done a little bit of looking into that. It doesn't look like a religious system at all, but I see where you're going. Just because he says there is no God doesn't mean it's not necessarily a religious
God.
Right.
Right. Man is God.
Right. In that view, yeah.
And see, Marx was a contemporary of Charles Darwin. And Marx was thrilled when Darwin provided, shall we say, the missing link for his religious system, which was the origin of species.
The means by which he could base his theory.
His creation narrative.
Gotcha.
in his religious framework.
Yeah.
If you look at Christianity, you have creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
You have the fall, where Adam and Eve sinned. And then you have the redemption narrative that was promised shortly after they fell in the Garden of Eden, but was provided through Jesus Christ. And then you have consummation, where you get to the eternal state, the end of time. Well, Karl Marx had a very similar framework where Charles Darwin provided his creation narrative.
Yeah.
He had a fall, which was basically back when we were Neanderthals, a patriarchal Neanderthal oppressed a feminine Neanderthal effectively and created a division of labor, which started the ball rolling for the division of labor that he so hated and loathed.
Yeah.
And man provides his own redemption through this iterative process, okay? When man gets to that perfect state of man in Karl Marx's vision, that's when he achieves the end of time. When time is no more, effectively. And so that's his religious system. Now, man doesn't know what that final perfect state is. If he did, he would have arrived, and then time would be no more. We would have reached the end of time. Okay. So what that means is that there is no absolute truth, because you can't objectively determine what that perfection is, right? And so as man is ratcheting in an iterative process towards that perfect man, he's doing so blindly. Okay. So he's basically shooting in the dark.
Okay.
It's like throwing stuff up against a wall and just seeing what sticks.
Seeing what sticks, yeah.
And that process is a destructive process. That's why the left is just so excited about the destruction that they see in America right now, because they see it as through that destruction that next
new
phase
stuff can come up. Yeah.
And the progressivism, right, of perfecting man. Right?
Yeah, the whole idea of let the revolution happen, right? That was kind of his idea.
Right? Not a reformation, a revolution, which requires destruction, right? And so what I ultimately want to get to, I want to make this as concise as I can,
right,
is that this religious system with the veneer of progressivism that we call it in our current ideology, that's the prevailing ideology in our country, is, since you're shooting in the dark, you're throwing stuff up against a wall and just seeing what sticks, you have no way to objectively define what is the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Right. If there's no objective truth, it's based on the person.
It's based on where you are in this progressive state of history, where you're ratcheting towards an unknown perfected state, right? And so that's where you get to in our culture. That if you're familiar with Matt Walsh, he just broke a big story about Vanderbilt.
I actually just heard about that today. I was listening to that today. Yeah.
Right. So in this destructive process that we're iterating through, if a kid has emotional, psychological confusion, well, let's just give him a double mastectomy and see what happens. Right. There is no objective standard that says this is morally wrong.
Right. There's no basis upon which to say this is right or wrong. All rules are to the individual. Yeah.
Correct. Right. And so I want to come back to, okay, as opposed to that, where we have no objective standards for morality to truly define what is good and true and beautiful. And therefore, progressivism is full of ideas.
Okay.
Bad ideas, right? Like, okay, we have a pandemic, so let's muzzle all of our kids in school with a useless Chinese face diaper and see how that goes over. Now, nationally, we have skyrocketing suicides amongst our young girls. We have emotional and psychological issues where therapy centers are just overrun with clients.
For sure.
We've damaged our children in such irreparable ways, because let's throw another bad idea at it and see how that sticks on the wall. Right.
Yeah, I think in a lot of things like this, a lot of those ideas come up, and it's, even though the idea might be accepted at first, the consequences are not thought through. Not to say that everyone accepted it, but the consequences are not thought through to the end here. Like, what's the effect of putting a mask over a kid's face and they can't see faces for a year? Like, I'm just coming out of school. I know what you mean.
Right.
Like,
yeah, the economist Thomas Sowell said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Progressives think in terms of solutions. Conservatives think in terms of trade-offs. Right?
Okay.
So to interpret that, the mask was a solution, but no one ever stopped to think about the trade-offs and the consequences.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a very good paraphrase of what I tried to say there.
Right. And so what I want to say is that as I come to the table and look at running for school board, I offer no new ideas. Because in this religious system with a veneer of progressivism, it's aiming towards this perfect man that we have no idea what he is, right? In reality, we already have a picture of what perfect man is. It's how God created man and woman in the Garden of Eden. That's the Edenic state. That's the perfect man without sin.
Right, the whole Genesis account there.
Absolutely. Even more so, if that weren't enough, God became flesh, took on form as a man in the man Jesus Christ. And gave us a perfect representation of what perfect man is, as he walked in conformity to God's perfect law.
Right.
So we already have objectively defined for us what perfect man is. And we have God's law that gives us everything that we need to know how to live in this life. Right. And so I offer no new ideas, because all new ideas are bad. In the sense that, as opposed to progressivism, that's shooting in the dark or throwing stuff up onto a wall and seeing what sticks, we can look back and see, even in the Old Testament, we're instructed, look, if you have a disease, you quarantine the sick and you don't quarantine the healthy. If we had followed that and had no new ideas, but simply listened to what the creator of the universe had instructed us for how we might live, the inflation that we're seeing now. I just saw a report on the way here that says that the average family is paying, or it's costing him $11,500 annually. Just the inflation.
That's I didn't realize that.
Nearly $1,000 a month that is costing the average family because of the inflation that we have right now, largely due to our response to the pandemic that we had.
Gotcha.
And so, in that sense, I want to assure people that instead of the next wild-eyed idea, I offer no new ideas, but simply would look to God's moral law as the guiding basis by which we would operate.
Yeah.
And so what we have in the schools right now is, we maintain the separation of church and state. And so we like to think of our schools as largely apolitical and a-religious, right?
Right.
My argument is that the school is operating primarily under the auspices of Karl Marx's religious system.
Okay.
It has permeated this institution at our local town in Ravenna. It is saturated with the religion of Karl Marx. Because it's not whether or not there's going to be a God over the system, but which God is over the system.
Right. Back to that whole just because you might say the Marxist system is atheistic, it doesn't necessarily mean there isn't a God figure in that type of thing.
Very conveniently, Marxism is the only ideology that the Supreme Court has not defined as a religion. Because if they did, it would expose it as the prevailing religion over our political system today.
It's very interesting. Yeah. I like your point too, with the no new ideas thing. At first, I kind of thought something probably a little bit different than you were thinking, but I believe there's the verse in Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun.
Sure.
Even if you bring something up at a meeting, it's been brought up before. Right.
You're just recapitulating it perhaps in a little different way or something, but that's absolutely right. There's nothing new under the sun. And all truth is God's truth in the sense that he defines what truth is. And since he never changes, neither does truth.
Gotcha.
Right. And so I don't want to sound like don't like innovation.
Right.
I'm all for technology and all of that. But as regards how do we deal with moral issues?
Right. Less the development and more of the moral side of things.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Correct. So as we deal with moral issues, like whether or not we should impose on our kids mandatory, if a parent thinks that it is justified given health conditions and family conditions to put a mask on their kid, I'm not going to say they can't.
Gotcha.
Right. That's where we get back to individual liberties, right? Absolutely. But when it comes from the draconian lockdown measures that we experience, things of that nature, it's absolutely critical that from a governance standpoint, that we and the moral issues, decisions that are made at the school board level, that we not have new ideas because they've proven to be deadly.
Gotcha. No, that's very good insights. Actually, gives I think that's a very good insight into why you're running, I guess.
Absolutely.
And honestly, that can be applied to a lot of things too. Like that's a very good basis to go on. And I guess that kind of ties into the next thing. What do you believe? You addressed this a lot already, but do you believe there's one pressing issue that you think needs to be addressed right now, or just more generally?
Absolutely. I mean, this is going to branch off into a few different things, but it didn't take a lot of research to realize that there are a few members of the faculty at Ravenna that have sported the rainbow flag.
Gotcha.
Right. We all know what that rainbow flag represents, and I'm going to use a provocative word to describe it, and that's sodomy. Right. So we are normalizing the practice of sodomy to our kids in school.
Gotcha.
That's a big issue, and that's a big deal. And that's why my children primarily are not in Ravenna public schools right now.
Okay.
That needs to be addressed. we're all familiar with the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, right? Russia has taken over a few towns as it makes its way over Crimea towards Ukraine and all of that. And you'll notice that once they, clear out an area and take control over a town, what's the first thing they do? They put up their flag. They put the Russian flag over that town, making a statement that this is now Russian territory. We all have that iconic image. I think it's over Iwo Jima when the Russians or the Americans, after having
the Marines raising the flag. Yes.
We all have that iconic image in our head, stating that the foe has been defeated. We are claiming this territory. Obviously, in America's greatness, that was ceded back, right? But the flag represents not just an ideology, but an assertion that we are taking dominion here. We're seeing across the nation, schools are rejecting the American flag, but yet we're seeing the rainbow banner put up in classroom after classroom after classroom. And that is, I'm going to say this, the religion of Karl Marx staking its claim as having taken dominion over that portion of our culture and our society. And it has to stop. It has to be rooted out. We cannot be normalizing sodomy or all the other things that are coming down the road. I have right here printed off from the Ravenna Public Schools website, the board policy. It reads, "It is the policy of the board that no person on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or ancestry, age, sex, marital status, disability, or English-speaking ability shall be discriminated against, excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be otherwise subjected to discrimination under any federally funded program or activity for which the board is responsible or for which it receives federal financial assistance for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare."
Okay.
Now, according to the Michigan Supreme Court ruling that happened recently with regards to discrimination of sex, that now includes in that definition the mutilation of our young kids.
Okay. I'm not very familiar with the Supreme Court ruling. Could you break that down a little bit?
It's the Michigan Supreme Court ruling. Right. And they basically ruled that with regards to sexual discrimination, you cannot discriminate based upon someone's gender identity.
Okay. Yeah.
So right with gender identity comes the mutilation of our young children through either hormone blockers, double mastectomies, the whole works. And so this is a big problem. This is the next thing down the pike. It's all under the same rainbow flag, right? They just keep adding colors to it, right? And we have to put a stop to it.
Gotcha.
I would say that the second most dangerous person in America is the kind of person that's actively pushing this sodomy, this transgenderism, the demonic butchering of our children, just like the Vanderbilt story that Matt Walsh just highlighted recently. The most dangerous person is the person that's too cowardly to do anything about it. And we need to fill our local school boards with men who know how to be gentle and gracious to those who are a bruised reed, but also can bear the sword and put an end to this demonic butchering of our children in our local communities. So I know that's a pretty dark, grave thing to talk about, but it needs to be discussed.
No, that's very, very true. Yeah, it's definitely something I recognize in our schools. Obviously, I just graduating. I know there were several kids who were LGBT in our schools. I guess my question to you with that, obviously, yes, I totally agree with you in that we need to be gentle to those, like you had said, gentle to those who are bruised reeds while still taking the sword and fighting for what is right.
Sure.
How do we make sure that sword does not cut those and unnecessarily harm those who are the bruised reed? What's your thoughts on dealing with those kids who are having that confusion, who have come out,
Absolutely,
to use those terms,
right,
while still fighting for what is true and right?
Absolutely.
And objectively true?
I would say that would definitely fall under the bruised reed category. And when I attended a board meeting recently, and I told the board that we've been told that to be kind and to nice to these kids is to capitulate to their confusion, right? That is the most cruel, barbaric thing that you could do. The kind thing is to teach them that they were made precious and beautiful by the hand of God. They have value and worth. They simply need to accept the value and worth as God created them, and to lead them and to coach them towards affirming how they were made in the image of God, and not to do the cruel and barbaric thing of accommodating them, and to lead them down the road where they could potentially end up with self-mutilation, self-harm,
in the form of surgery or otherwise,
which ultimately leads to extremely high rates of suicide, everything else, because again, all these new ideas are very bad ideas.
No, thank you for that distinction.
So to further answer your question, that would be the Bruce Reed side of things. If you forgive me as I take a drink of water here.
No, you're fine. And actually, it's funny. The first time I heard your name, my dad had given me the paper, The Independent. I had mentioned some school board stuff, and he gave me this because it mentioned some of that. I saw your name, Ryan Anderson. Where was it on here? Public comment. Board of Education, Ryan Anderson affirms his belief that there are two God-given genders and was concerned that the school might accommodate other philosophies. That was in the Ravenna Independence.
Yeah, if I could, I'd edit that. I don't believe that they're two different genders. They're two different sexes.
Gotcha.
Gender is a false dichotomy. You have a sex given by God. Gender is a word that should be used exclusively to refer to pronouns. Like in the Spanish language, you'll have male and female gendered pronouns.
I remember that from Spanish class.
Right. And we'll have that in English as well. But with regards
shout out to Mr. Slater, by the way.
Yeah. With regards to our biology, the proper word for that is sex, and there is no dichotomy between our biology and our emotional state.
Gotcha.
Those are inseparably tied.
Gotcha. No, yeah. That was just the first time I'd heard your name, and it definitely ties into this. So in terms of then the fighting for truth side of that, the sword, I believe you were going to say...
Yeah. I mean, again, we need to understand what is cruel and harsh and what really isn't, what is being nice and kind and what isn't. And sometimes being nice is bearing the sword, right? If there's an intruder that's trying to make his way into my home, being nice is to pull out my firearm and kill him if necessary, because my primary duty is to defend my wife and children, right? That is the good thing to do, is bearing the sword in that circumstance.
Right.
Same thing on our southern border. We have all sorts of human trafficking going on our southern border. We have people dying left and right. We have 50 migrants that are dying in box trucks, due to heat exhaustion at the southern border. All in the name of being nice, right? The nice thing to do is to have a strict border policy where you come in legally or you're told to turn around and go home, because then we don't have the opportunity for the horrific sex trafficking, human trafficking that's going on at our southern border.
All the stuff that's not always talked about.
Correct. All the stuff that's not often talked about. So a good and nice border policy is a harsh border policy. A nice home defense policy is a harsh policy where you have a firearm handy to defend your wife and children. And the same thing with our schools. Teachers who want to line up in their rainbow shirts and take pictures and do photo shoots in school with that should not be teachers. They should be fired. They have no place in our community. Sodomy has no place in our community. And it's been around since I'm forgetting the Supreme Court decision that rendered that a legitimate activity. Forgive me, but it was only a few years ago that Supreme Court case was handed down.
The decision of allowing same-sex marriage?
Correct.
Okay, yes. I don't remember the date either, but I do remember hearing all the news around that.
It was only a few years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't too...
But it has been crammed down our throats. It's called jamming, where we're normalized to it. But we need to remember that God basically nuked a couple cities in the Old Testament, and that is a historical fact.
Yeah.
Because of that particular sin, and so we need to be godly is to think of things in the same way God does. Um, and so we need to recognize that as not something that should be welcomed in our community, should be welcome in our schools. It's evil. It's wicked.
Yeah.
So
No, thank you for sharing that too, especially this was already deeper than I'd planned, but I love it because honestly, this is what people need to hear, right? Like they want to see which candidate will best represent their beliefs, and I believe that would appeal to a lot of people in our community as well. No, thank you for sharing all that as well. I like your comment about being nice isn't always. It sometimes will involve being harsh.
Correct.
The gun example, the sword example.
Yeah, so when I said earlier that I want to really, my primary goal is I want to simply affirm the good, the true, and the beautiful as God objectively defined. Right. I didn't need to include violent in that trilogy of three virtues, right? Because if necessary, violence falls under being good, right? The good thing that I do for my family is to be violent against those who would harm them.
I believe I read a quote one time: "The best man is a dangerous man that has learned to control it."
Good way to say that.
Going through, like, if you need to stand up and be strong, yes, 100%. One question just to kind of piggyback off of that. You talked about the separation of church and state too. Being honest, the specifics of that I'm still working through in my own life, as I believe we all are.
Be careful, you might be accused of being a Christian nationalist.
How would you go about the process of affirming what is objectively true in a system that is a public school? Where do the lines have to be drawn based upon the laws that are currently in place? Where are some areas in which that you cannot compromise? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very challenging question. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
As far as the origin of the species, what were you taught at Ravenna Public Schools?
As far as the origin of the species, I'm the wrong person to ask for that. My dad is actually a science teacher at the schools. Clark Cantola, he teaches in the middle school. Before that, I had, I believe, my first. Trying to think way back. But he also attends here. So I've heard the creation narrative before going into schools. I've heard the evolution narrative before going into schools, and the nuances and differences between the two, ultimately, that the creation narrative was true.
Right.
So I kind of knew that going into schools already. I was exposed to both in the classroom settings.
Fair enough. I guess let me rephrase it then.
Yeah.
As far as your knowledge of the curriculum goes,
yes.
What is in the curriculum at Ravenna Public Schools?
So obviously I've been a recipient of it. I haven't read the specific curriculum. What I can tell you, I've been exposed to. I've been exposed to that typical evolutionary narrative of mankind came. Paraphrasing, mankind came from apes, Big Bang, Big Bang, 4.5 billion. I think someone can correct me on that.
The number keeps going up.
Yeah. Billion years ago. But I will say this: some of my teachers as well have been graciously allowed to present the other side.
Absolutely.
In addition to that.
Absolutely.
So, which completely is legal. Yes.
You go back to your question about why do I love being in this rural community of Ravenna. Because there is that, right? There are a lot of good people that, would just shriek at the thought of teaching transgender ideology and all this kind of stuff. They're rooted in Christian values and all that. but go back to my point. To teach the hypothesis of evolution, because it doesn't even qualify as a theory, is to advocate for a religious system.
Gotcha. I'm going to push this a little bit closer to you, yeah.
And so we're already dealing with a religion being advocated, taught, in the public schools, in our school system. And so the thought of, okay, are you just wanting to Christianize everything? Well, everything has already been communized, made
Marxized
Marxized
to make up a term.
to make up a word, right?
I see where you're going with that.
And so we're already there. And the question is, okay, how do we peel back those layers and affirm truth, right? Let's go back to the good, the beautiful, and the true. There's always going to be that person that says, well, in the Leviticus, it says that if a parent has a disobedient child, you should take him out and stone him, right? Obviously not understanding the context and making the accusation that would want to be imposed upon our current society.
Context is kind of important there.
Which is utter ridiculousness, right? No, so what is true? That God made the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh. What is false? What is the lie? That we evolved from apes, right? What is true? That scientific studies, even before the pandemic started, had made it very obvious that face masks were not capable of stopping a respiratory virus. That is true. Those scientific studies were available. They were suppressed, so a lot of people were unaware of those studies. But I did that research early on, and so I never wore a mask. I did one time in order to get my daughter into the hospital for an X-ray.
Gotcha.
But aside from that, I never wore a mask because I didn't want to put a lie on my face. Because that mask communicated that it was doing something to help the health of either me or those around me, and that was a lie. And so that's the framework by which decisions need to be made at the school board level. Is it good? Is it beautiful? Or is it true? As objectively defined by God.
Gotcha.
And so in a general way, I hope that answers your question.
It does to an extent. I guess the kind of where I was coming from that, to use your terms, a lot of the laws that have been passed currently do reflect that, in your words, Marxist worldview, along with twinges of other worldviews thrown in there as well. Where's
how do you navigate that world in which laws conflict with your worldview?
Yes, especially in the public school setting, to where, yes, creation can be taught alongside evolution, but there is still the barrier of specifically teaching Christian religion, or I think ideology is the wrong word, but within the school setting, how do you navigate around that?
Yeah, that's a challenging thing. Like after Roe v. Wade was struck down, right, the Michigan 1930 law was more or less recognized, even though it was always in effect and in force.
Gotcha. And I've heard of it, but could you explain the Michigan 1931 law?
The Michigan 1931 law basically made abortion outlaw. I don't remember the particulars, but I think there were a couple notable exceptions, like health of the mother.
Okay.
Like that. But aside from that, in 1931, law was passed in Michigan outlawing abortion.
Gotcha.
With that exception of the health of the mother. With Roe v. Wade being struck down, even though the law still should have been recognized all throughout the course of Roe v. Wade, when it was recognized that was an unlawful decision by the court, the abortion clinics continued to operate, even with the 1931 law being in effect. So my point to this is, people were sufficiently motivated by their ideology, by their zeal and their religious convictions, what I would call the culture of death, to continue killing their babies, even when the law made that unlawful.
Because technically during that period it was illegal.
Even after Roe v. Wade was struck down.
Correct.
So all you have is the 1931 Michigan law that made abortion illegal, and abortion clinics continued to operate and continued to murder little babies, right? So here, basically, that's civil disobedience, right? We see a case of civil disobedience where people are willing to disobey the law in order to do, their intentions.
Right. Similar in a way, though for very different reasons, to the Martin Luther King civil disobedience, coming from that with the same idea, way different paths away.
Yeah,
I see what you're saying now. Yeah.
With Jim Crow.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of it that way.
Those were immoral laws that they exercised civil disobedience because they recognized, just like at Nuremberg. Are you familiar with Nuremberg?
Nuremberg trials, Nazis after World War II, correct? I don't know much of the specifics, but I have heard of that.
They said, okay, so your national laws said you had to ultimately kill the Jews, right?
Right.
When the National Convention at that court in Nuremberg, when they convened, they said, even though that was your highest law in the nation, there's still a higher law, natural law, that overrides and overrules even your national laws.
I did not know that. I'm going to have to look that up a little bit. The natural law within the Nuremberg trials.
Natural law, right. And that basically, so what they're saying is there's an objective standard even above your national politics that determines morality. Right.
Right. And that idea is very much being challenged in America right now.
Right. And so ultimately, we're not a nation of laws, we're a nation of political will. People who are determined to kill their babies are going to kill it, whether the law says they can or not. And I'm determined to uphold God's law, whether federal law says I can or not. So we go back to this policy that I read.
Yeah.
That any department that's received federal financial assistance from the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare has to abide by our non-discrimination policy.
Yeah.
And so the Ravenna School Board right now, it is their policy to obey the feds because we've taken their money.
Right.
It's called a bribe, right?
I guess so.
They also say it's extortion if they confiscate our money and then give it back to us if we comply, right? Ultimately, we have to make hard decisions and be willing to say, no, we're not going to comply with federal non-discrimination policy if it means protecting our children from the, they call it gender dysphoria, mental illness,
right?
All these sorts of things. I have every intention of discriminating against someone who's a sodomite and wants to normalize that with our children in our schools.
No, yeah, that's...
Right. So federal law or federal policy, because we've taken federal funds, says you can't discriminate against someone, if they profess to be gay, and we still have to employ them. I say I don't care. I'm going to do what's right before God.
Gotcha. No, that is that's good. That is very good. And answers the question very well as well. No, thank you for that. I think that definitely gives a good insight too. I guess into the views of both sides. I guess I recently attended a conference on worldview. And it was taught through the Christian perspective, and it was taught very much that way just because the whole idea of Christianity as a religion, and we're kind of like the school's pulling back from that and just saying we're apolitical, religious. That's not really the case.
There's the secularism is a misnomer, right?
It in itself is a religion.
It is a religion, and we've the greatest play the devil ever tricked was to convince people that he didn't exist, right? There is no neutrality. It's either Christ or chaos. You're either serving the Lord of this world or the Lord over all worlds, right? And so there is no happy sandbox where we can get along and play and pretend that we can be a-religious and all of that. And I think the religious zealotry that we saw during COVID really highlighted that for a lot of people and made people realize, wow, I'm just trying to go shopping and people are seething with rage because I'm not complying with a mask requirement, right? And so we saw the religious zealotry of people who profess to be a-religious.
Yeah. Right. No, I see what you're saying. Christ or chaos.
Correct.
There's no middle ground.
It's not whether but which. It's not whether you're serving a God, but which God you're serving.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, thank you. I think that defines it very well. Gives a lot of good insights here. If there's any way to transition out of that, in somewhat of a smooth way, I did want to ask, I guess this does tie in. The role of the public school in the community. We've talked about this a little bit already, but as a public, I guess, government institution
Sure.
within the community, what's its role at large? Just what is it there to do, and what does the school board do to uphold that?
Absolutely. The founders of this country recognized the necessity of an educated populace. Right. That goes back to the core founding of this nation. There were obviously educated men that wrote our founding documents that appealed to numerous national documents of other nations, the Magna Carta, the governing document for Scotland. Going back to Aristotle, they were very learned men. They studied the national documents of other nations as they formulated the documents for our own.
Absolutely.
And they recognized the necessity of that, continuing as a heritage of the American people. And so that's really kind of the birthplace of the educational system in America. It stems back to the founders and the necessity they saw of having an educated populace. What we have nowadays is a miseducated populace where we're seeing censorship from the main disseminators of information and media. You're considered a quack if you say that, look, we knew very early on that hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin were very helpful as an early treatment option to mitigate against COVID symptoms. And you're seen as a quack if you say that. Well, only because it wasn't on TV.
Right. There's still education going on. It's just not whether or not it's true.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And all the countless lives that could have been saved if they weren't continuing a narrative in order to maintain the fear and hysteria necessary to sell a vaccine that isn't a vaccine. So, but as far as the purpose of Ravenna public schools in this community, education is absolutely critical. It's just like going back to miseducation, maleducation, misinformation. I mentioned the terrible tragedy of the increased number of suicides, especially amongst the young ladies in our community. Not in our community. Fortunately, I haven't heard of anything in our local community, but nationally, there's certainly been an increase in that. Going back to the good and the true and the beautiful, when you teach children from the time that they're young that they evolved from pond scum, from the Big Bang, that once we were apes and now we managed to get into this, more highly evolved state that we are, what purpose do they have in life?
Right. Where's the objective grounding of purpose within that?
Right. When you tell them that they're made in the image of God with a soul, an eternal soul, whom God loves so much that he sent his son to die for, that they might be redeemed out of their sin and find a reestablished relationship with him after having been estranged because of their sin. That is a paradigm and a game changer that gives us all a reason and a purpose that Marxism can never do.
Gotcha. So to paraphrase, I guess the role of the school system is to promote that educated populace on the basis of truth. No, that's very grounding. I appreciate that.
I highly value education. I've got a mechanical engineering degree, so I've got my bachelor's in that. I did spend some time in seminary pursuing an MDiv.
Oh, really? Where at?
A couple of different seminaries. I don't want to divulge that information at this time.
Totally fine.
But even before I went there, I taught myself basic Greek, so I could do some summary reading in the Greek New Testament before I went there. I think education is massively important, and independent education as well. But we also need to recognize that children or people in general are not computers, right? They're not flash drives that you can plug into a computer, download some information, and then they're good to go.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I will make sure to get you these recordings afterwards.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I stepped out of seminary. Is I realized that system is one in which the potential pastor is treated as a thumb drive, where you download a bunch of theology and then send him off after a few years and expect him to be able to minister to the hearts and souls of people in the context of a church.
So the information was given, but not necessarily ways to communicate. that information well.
Correct. And so learning how to operate in that role within the context of local church,
Gotcha.
where you're working with people, just establishing and building relationships and all
Absolutely.
of that.
That's the keys to a good pastor.
Right. Absolutely. And you can't get that when you've had to uproot your family and move and go to a seminary environment that has very, very obviously pulled you out of that context.
Right.
Right. And so that was one of the reasons I left seminary, because it lost that relational aspect in the building and maintaining of relationships necessary to learn how to minister to people.
Yeah.
And that's going back to this community, Ravenna, the local public school here, is all the teachers here are people that love and are very much involved and engaged in their community. Right. That's the best way to teach math, is by someone who, knows where their kids live and, waves to them as they drive by, that sort of thing. That's the type of community that's beautiful.
Has the information, but also is engaged with the people they're teaching.
Because they're people.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're people.
No, that is well said. Well said. Tying into that, this is something that I probably should know a little bit more about, and I'm asking each school board member this. What does a member of the school board actually do to uphold that vision, right? Like, I get it's not a day-to-day, you go into the office, you work and whatever. Mm-hmm. What does a school board member do to carry out the duties of a school board member?
Yeah, it's if you
Yeah, no, you're fine. It's something I've always wondered about.
Well, it's just a lot of decisions. Some of it is just a the formality of approving various things.
The things we see in the meetings, yeah.
Right, from the superintendent and things of that nature.
And I guess I'm asking more of the background work that we don't see. Because obviously you guys do stuff, to be good members, you should, at least outside of that meeting setting.
Right. So like the new the school policy booklet that was approved recently at the meeting that I was at.
I believe I read the minutes on that as well, too.
Sure. There was a little bit of a discussion because some members weren't able to find the link for the original, so as to compare the two and kind of go over the changes that had been proposed and things of that nature. So a lot of the decisions are made by like the superintendent, right? And so the purpose of the school board member, as elected by the community, is to represent the community of Ravenna and that school district.
Gotcha.
So that their, I would even say, moral interests are made sure to be held by the decisions that are made. Right?
Gotcha.
So, okay, we need to hire a new first grade teacher. So I would do a deep dive in researching into that person that is vying for that position, has submitted the resume, read over that, really make sure that, this is going to be a person that is going to love the kids, teach them, have a good worldview, right, and all of that, and not introduce these destructive, harmful ideologies, right? And so that's my primary concern, is to safeguard the children of the school in the hiring process of various teachers and things of that nature, to make sure that the moral interests of the community are being reflected in who is hired and things of that nature.
Okay. So reflecting, I guess, being the people.
You're a representative.
Yeah.
You're a representative.
No, that's a very good way to think about it.
You take the baseball coach, or just as I drove by, there was football being played out there, right?
Right.
Or take the football coach.
I think my little cousin was out there. You probably saw him.
So I don't have the expertise to teach football, right? So that's where I, as a representative of the Ravenna School District community, am looking to find someone that's experienced, skilled, and also has the character to do that job well.
Right.
And so that's what the school board member, I would say, ultimately does, is represents the Ravenna school board, the school community, in ensuring that especially the faculty and all the parts and puzzles of this school are such that we have the character to not make bad decisions, as we've talked about earlier.
Yeah.
But to make good decisions based upon the good, the beautiful, and the true, and to champion that vision forward.
Gotcha. No, that is well said too, and that, I guess, helps me understand a little bit more as well, exactly what I'm electing people to do here.
Right, and there's also a lot of financial decisions.
Right.
Do we purchase this van, or do we purchase that van? Do we invest in this system or that.
Yeah.
And those have massive moral ramifications too. Where are the funds coming from to make these purchases? Is it coming from the federal government, where we're now beholden to them to abide by certain non-discrimination policies that will introduce the harmful ideologies that the federal government is wanting to push upon us?
Yeah.
Just step back and think about that. That some bureaucrat in Washington is dictating how we operate in our local community
just by the giving of money,
but by the accepting of that money by the school board if they so choose to do so. Right?
Okay.
So massive moral implications and ramifications in the financial decisions that are made, determining how much we are beholden to people that have no true vested interest in our local community.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, thank you. And just a note for those who are listening, I did not realize praise team practice was going on tonight. So if you hear any music, consider it background noise. No, that makes a lot of sense too. Going into the school board as well. Do you have any previous school board experience?
I do not.
Okay, gotcha. No, that was just something I'm curious.
I guess you could say that I could, and that I oversee the curriculum of my kids right now. But,
that is very true. That's mini school board in itself, right there. Yeah. No, so going into a school board role, how do you stay focused on the students? And I guess to piggyback off of that, what is objectively true, right? Because there's a lot of issues that'll come in, or at least in my mind, it seems like there could be a lot of issues that come up. How does the board stay focused on its mission of representing the people well in this decision making of the schools?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to go with that.
No, that's totally fine.
I've mentioned that because I moved into the area only a year and a half ago, my familiarity with the community is where I'm lacking, obviously, and that plays a very critical part in that process, right?
Gotcha.
I need to be familiar with the community, the students, and all of that.
Yeah, come to homecoming, you'll definitely see that.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm looking forward to participating in some of that. But that's a critical juncture in. It's like, okay, let's take what we were just talking about with some federal bureaucrat in Washington. They're not focused on the students. They don't know who they are.
How can they at that level?
Right, they can't.
Right.
And so, to my point, I'm just saying it's so necessary to be involved and to be active in that, to understand and know where the students are at. It's like I love the bee program that they've got going here.
I'm sorry, bee program?
Yeah, where they make the honey and all of that.
Bee like honeybee. Yeah.
Honeybee program.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's really cool. It really gives students some hands-on experience with making something with their own hands. Kind of like I'm doing my own hobby farm with my kids, right?
Yeah. The honey's not bad too.
So that's a really cool program. I like that, and I was watching some of the testimonials from the kids that went through that program, and it was really cool just to see their eyes light up as they realized the potential in the world that's out there.
For sure.
Even with bees, it's such a simple thing, but it's also really cool. And so programs like that would really help the kids engage, work with their hands. I think just having my own little hobby farm helps lend to that and realize what is good for kids. As the first time we had the chickens, my daughter wanted to go out multiple times a day to see if there were more eggs out there. It's like, well, gotta learn that it's only once a day.
Yeah.
Later she came back and we have 4 chickens. She brought home 6 eggs. She was like, I got 6 eggs today. I was like, did you go out yesterday? No, that's why.
Gotcha. No, and man, those eggs are good.
Yes, they are.
Man, they are. Yeah. I gotcha. So yeah, you're talking a lot about that community engagement then. Right. What are some of the ways you're going to do that as a school board member, just to stay plugged in and engaged in all of that? Or ways that you have been that you are continuing to do?
Well, to be honest, I bought a fixer-upper, and that's been distracting me up to this point.
Gotcha.
But we're kind of coming around the home stretch on that.
Hey, no, house projects are real. I totally get it.
Oh, yeah. I just brought home today some flooring to put in the kids' bedrooms.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the finishing touch on that. Well, you mentioned homecoming, school board meetings, keeping up on the build project that's going on right now, and sports events, right?
Right.
That's a great way for the community to come together, and we've seen how progressivism has destroyed national football, the Boy Scouts, and things of that nature. If we can, on a local level, just come together as a community and keep
Those
it
big events, yeah.
keep it a great coming together as a community type events. I think those are huge. That's where you can really talk to other parents, build relationships at sporting events, things of that nature.
Yeah,
that'd be really good.
No, that's awesome too. Yeah, just for the connection and all of that. Obviously, I've seen a lot of other members there too, so I love that. Another question here. I not naming instances really because I don't know of too many, but I know personal in the professional, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep the personal, I guess, not only beliefs but pride, ego, all of those things? How do you keep that out of school board and just focus on what you need to focus on?
Sure.
Granted, the worldview beliefs that need to stay a part of it.
Right. And it's a challenging question because I depending on where you're wanting to go with that, my visceral reaction is almost to say that I don't, right? When I was an engineer, you're sitting in a cubicle. In one sense, that can be one of the most dehumanizing types of environments.
Yeah.
And so there you've got to maintain relationships with your colleagues, be involved in their personal life. I'm going to create a drawing, and then my buddy's going to create a drawing, and they're going to trade drawings and check each other's work and make sure that we haven't made any errors in our engineering prints.
Intentionally being personal within the professional?
Absolutely. Intentionally being personal. Because again, like we've talked about earlier with regards to education, kids aren't thumb drives that you can just download and information. They're people, right? And the same thing with that. When in the work that I do now is really just trying to help people realize their dreams with remodeling and fixing up their home and that nature, additions and things of that nature. So that's really where, especially in these times where inflation is going rampant, commodity prices are going through the roof, they're having to cut back, and it's harder and harder to build that addition for the room that they need for their family in this environment. Right. So I can just tell them, hey, I'm in the middle of it too. Since I built the new bedrooms for my kids, they've been running around in unpainted subfloor because I didn't have money for flooring, right?
Gotcha.
And so helping them understand how they can cash flow various aspects of the project to still realize their dreams and accomplish it might be over a more extended period of time, but bringing that personal into it, helping them realize, their dreams in that nature. But with regards to like a meeting environment, we have to be careful there too, because we were told to just maintain cordiality during. I'm going to come back to COVID again, and not put up a fight, and that maintaining that cordiality allowed for a lot of draconian measures to get implemented that shouldn't have been.
Interesting. So keeping the personal out of it might have led to some of the problems.
Correct, because the other side got personal real quick and accused me of trying to kill grandma.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
So they had no shame in getting personal in order to push their agenda. And when it comes to the next thing that's coming down the road, whether it's another pandemic or whether it's transgenderism, I have no problem getting personal, and I have no problem fighting, and I intend to win when it comes to bad ideas that will harm these kids.
I definitely asked that question the wrong way then. No, for sure. Bringing that personal and yes, this is what I'm going to stand for. There are certain things that need to be brought into that. Absolutely. Sure. Yeah. I guess my question then was more on the pride and ego side of things. Less the I believe it should be done in according with this worldviews, and more of the I want it done this way type of thing.
Yeah, humility. Absolutely. And I guess I keep going back to we're all people, and recognizing that the person on the other side of the table is a person. They've got kids, they've got a wife likely, and all that, and recognizing that even though you have disagreements, they're still made in the image of God, and so there are some wrong and bad ideas out there that you need to put your foot down and be resolute on.
Yeah.
But doing that in such a way that shows grace to them. I guess I'm not sure if I'm getting at what you're asking yet, but does that answer your question? Is that what
a little bit? Yeah. I coming in with humility, honestly, is the biggest thing. Just that very much answers the question there. Yeah. That was honestly my biggest thing there. Do you have anything else you'd like to say just in terms of your school board candidacy, things people should know? It's great just getting to know you a little bit more too. Like you'd said, I know the community doesn't know you as
Right.
well. I hope this is very helpful in doing so.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I hope it makes few people scratch their heads.
Yeah.
This is something that um, in the last few years with COVID, we've really had to scratch through and figure out, how do we deal with various issues?
Yeah.
We have all these bad ideas that are going around and being implemented and wreaking a lot of havoc, and so a lot of people have been asking, okay, what is the ultimate standard? What I'm also an elected official. I'm a delegate. And I've met so many people that have also jumped into that ring of representing a party and things of that nature.
Gotcha.
And there's so many people that are fired up. They see that there's a lot of things going on that they know are wrong, but they don't know what or how to do anything different. They know it's wrong, but what's right?
Gotcha.
They know that this Vanderbilt thing that you brought up with Matt Walsh is wrong, where they're mutilating kids. They know that's wrong, but what's the solution to that? And I guess if I can summarize anything, again, I bring no new ideas. I simply have the solution of the instruction manual given by the creator of the universe.
He's got the ideas.
He's got all the good ideas because he's the definer of truth. He's the one who's made us, created us, has graciously given us his word, his law to guide us, in the course of all these decisions that we have to make.
Absolutely.
And so that's ultimately what my message is, and I want to communicate is I simply want to advocate the good, the true, and the beautiful as objectively defined by God. Because in a world where we know that there's so much wrong going on, what's right, that's where it's found.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the basis for the decisions that are made by the school board members. That's what it needs to be. Anything else is shooting in the dark. It's throwing stuff up against a wall and seeing what sticks, and that does not end well.
No, thank you for that too. Any ways people can get in contact with you if they want to reach out, learn more? I'm going to be posting these in the weeks coming up before the election. Mm-hmm. So if anyone has any questions to reach out or see like that, what's the best way to do that?
Facebook.
Facebook? Okay.
I'm not much of a Facebook guy. I did create a page just so that people could reach out and contact me.
Is this your personal page or one separate for your school board candidacy?
It's a personal page, but that's really all I'm using it for is the school board candidacy. So people are welcome to message me on there.
I'll link that in the show notes or description.
Perfect. Appreciate it. And I really encourage anyone to reach out to ask me questions. If there's some clarification they'd like on anything that they've heard here today, send me a message on Facebook, and I do what I can to answer that.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you. I guess last question, just to kind of wrap this all up. Obviously, you haven't been here a super long time, but if you're running for school board, you obviously like the community a whole lot. What's your best memory so far made in Ravenna or just kind of this small town surrounding area?
I brought it up earlier, and that was just, I'd been fixed up my house over the winter, and when spring came out and people were kind of getting around a little bit more, just how the community just started stopping by and introducing themselves. It just was such a warm welcome, with just realizing that this is just a really warm community that I'm glad that my kids can grow up and be a part of. So I guess that'd be one of the best memories just of the Ravenna community and all that.
That's sweet. Yeah. And I think that's very stereotypical is the wrong word, but a good description of how our community can come together and support well. No, well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you putting together. Like I said, it's a lot of work coordinating all this, and I look forward to getting posted.
Hey, it's been fun. Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Insights. If you liked it, please leave a rating on Spotify or YouTube and comment on your thoughts. I'd love your feedback on this episode, the podcast in general, or ideas for future episodes. You can message me on Facebook or on Instagram at Isaac Cantola, all lowercase. I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for listening.